There's some news floating around that Panini is up for sale, and apparently Topps is one of the companies looking to acquire them. I sort of want to unpack what I think this means for the industry, and then also give a bit of a clarification to some information that's out there that's clearly based on speculation and rumor that's somewhat being reported as fact. So stay tuned for that, and we'll talk about it in the comments as always. Now, I saw Neo Cards and Comics talk about this earlier today. I haven't watched his video in its entirety. I maybe saw a minute or two, so I don't know what specifically he covered. But it relates to this article over here posted by Sports Collectors Daily within the last 12 to 24 hours. And like it does say, Panini Group exploring sale, Topps named as a potential buyer. Now, this is specifically in relation to Panini's parent company, i.e. Panini in Italy, the ones that own Panini America, and how their CEO and largest shareholder passed away, I think, within the last 12 months or so. And the company has now brought on Citibank to try and look for potential investment opportunities and start taking some offers. And that's essentially what this article talks about. Now, this is particularly interesting for a few reasons, because it's not just Panini America. When people think about Panini, they think about the trading card market. But this is the parent company, i.e. the same company that produces all those stickers that you see around World Cup times. They own a number of comic book licenses in Italy as well. I think they have the Disney license and also Marvel, if I remember correctly, which makes sense considering they're both owned by the same parent company. But one of those things that is very, very interesting when you think about what this means, right? They've said over here, Topps is named as a potential buyer. When you're talking about the issues currently being faced by the hobby, right, where one company is essentially producing everything, you've now got a company getting more licenses. What is that going to mean if they go ahead and buy Panini? You've now got one company, i.e. Fanatics owning Topps and Panini. That doesn't leave consumers with a whole lot of competition. And it makes me, very nervous when it comes to that, right? Like, one of the things I've pushed for, since Topps has come on board with these licenses is ways for Panini to stay competitive, right? Because you want those two businesses going head to head, because that's how you sort of get competition brewing. And when you've got more competition between two companies, that's where you start getting a lot of value being created for consumers, right? You look at the battles between Coca-Cola and Pepsi as an example, Apple and, Google when it comes to phone production. These two companies going toe-to-toe, they have to try and find points of difference. They have to try and create more value. That's where, customers and collectors get better off, because you've now got companies, going against each other to try and create more value for us, give us more opportunities, give us more things to collect, cooler objects like, the MLB debut patches that came out, right? That's a really cool idea from Topps. I was curious to see, hey, if Panini had the licenses, what would they come up with to be differentiated there? Now, just quickly, I should have mentioned at the start, this is not a newspaper report that's written by someone from Sports Collectors Daily. They're referencing an article written in Italy in an Italian newspaper. And that's really important with this paragraph over here, because this is where I think, like I said at the start, things are very interesting and a little bit misleading, and there's misinformation out there. Because this article says the Topps company, owned by Fanatics, is explicitly identified in the Italian newspaper report as a leading candidate to have interest in Panini's operation. They say it's explicitly identified as a leading candidate. Remember those words. If you jump to the article itself, they essentially talk to the fact that there's no one really noted yet. They've brought in Citibank to do this advisory work, i.e. to identify potential private equity firms coming in or new shareholders coming in and taking over the business. But the reason why that's important is because the article basically just talks to rumors. It says over here, according to rumors, one of these could include the American group, the Topps company, a multinational owned by a group of investors, aka Fanatics. This sentence here reads very different to what this one does over here. You've got these individuals over here from Sports Collectors Daily saying it's explicitly identified that they are a leading candidate to have interest in Panini's operation. And in the Italian newspaper report, keep in mind, Panini is owned, they're an Italian company, right? The people that are close to that business in terms of reporting have said that they could be interested. There's rumors they could be interested. They're not mentioned as a leading candidate. They're just mentioned as somebody that could potentially come in, because people are putting, two and two together, considering the licenses that Panini once owned and now Fanatics has the rights to, right? So it's one of those things that I think we need to watch very closely. People are going to say Topps is buying them. That's not explicit here. That's still innuendo at this stage. It's still rumor. It does make sense that they would want to acquire them, because Panini's brands are phenomenal. If you look at what they own, they've got Prism, Flawless, Eminence. Those three things alone are amazing, and they've been staples of the hobby for the last 10 or so years. So it makes sense why they'd want to try and acquire those, or why they'd want to get their hands on them, and why any business within the sports card manufacturing space would want to get their hands on them, because now that they have all the licenses, they could continue those brands. They could combine them into things like Topps Chrome with Prism, And people would go bananas for that sort of stuff, right? Because they clearly like those things. So it's not far-fetched to say that they are, interested, but just the way it's being reported as Topps being a leading candidate, it's just a bit out there at the moment. I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say down in the comments below, but I think it's one of those things that we need to watch this space. Now, also very quickly, more legitimate branding has reported on this, with Reuters basically saying the same sort of thing, but when they've referenced, the Topps Group, they've said it was reported on Thursday that private equity firms and US Group, the Topps company, could be interested in acquiring the business. It's, not hard and fast like what Sports Collectors Daily are saying, which is really disappointing to sort of see these. I've referenced these guys before, but it's one of those things that, we need to watch closely, and it could be, pretty poor for us as collectors, right? I like the fact that Panini is going to stick around and they're going to keep producing unlicensed cards, because I like the fact they're going to challenge and be a point of difference. And I like the fact that they're suing Topps from an antitrust perspective, because they're saying you can't have one company own all the licenses, right? It's a monopoly. It's not good for consumers. So, I would like to see that ruling go ahead and we can see Panini and Topps make cards at the same time. I explained it for a few minutes at the start of this video, right? You want that competition. So the fact that you're now going to have one company potentially acquire another and have all that branding is just not good, because then what's next? Is it going to be Upper Deck getting bought next? Is it going to be, Leaf getting acquired after that? Is it going to be every manufacturer out there that's, in competition with Fanatics now being rubbed out and being acquired to then be killed? The same sort of thing like you saw happen there with PSA and SGC, right? They clearly bought a competitor under a false pretense, in the sense that they were going to keep them as a boutique brand. They were going to keep them uplifted. It was going to be a cohesion. And then, 12, 18 months later, they were gone. You very much could see that happening here, and it's just not good for consumers. So, I'm really keen to hear what your guys' thoughts are down in the comments below. I think it's interesting, like I've said probably countless times and too many times now. I want to sort of see what happens next. The fact that Citigroup has been engaged implies that they are serious about selling. Given that Panini was historically a family business that was owned by the Panini brothers, I think that's who started the company, it would be nice to sort of see them not be, compartmentalized out and sold off in segments, right? It'd just be nice to see a family-owned business that's still around, operating as, they have intended to and how they have been for so long, right? I would like to see them continue to challenge and do what they do, right? Because people clearly like their stickers, especially, in Europe and other parts of the world, but it would just be really disappointing to see them get acquired by Fanatics. So I've spoken now for I don't know how long, probably made no sense. Fundamentally, you've got rumors that Panini is up for sale. You've got rumors that Topps is one of the companies looking at them. And I think we as consumers need to watch this very, very closely, because I don't think it's going to mean a whole lot of good for us if it does in fact go ahead. Now, some people will like it, but I just think we need more competition. I don't see anybody saying, hey, we need more monopolies going on here. So anyway, drop your thoughts down in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next one. Cheers.